Here's a question for you. Do you believe in heaven? If not, what evidence could convince you? Our next guest has done the research and put together this book. It's called The Case for Heaven. And we welcome to the program author and former investigative reporter Lee Strobel. Good morning, Lee. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe people who aren't familiar with you. Your life back 40 years ago was very different than it is today.
Yeah.
Share with us about that.
Yeah, I was an atheist for much of my life. My background's in journalism and law, so I was legal editor of the Chicago Tribune, tended to have a skeptical DNA, was not readily convinced by superficial arguments for the existence of God. And then I got the bad news one day that my wife had become a Christian. And so I thought, great, this is going to be the end of our marriage. But then I thought, well, maybe I could rescue her from this cult that she's gotten involved in if I could just disprove Christianity. And I knew I could do that if I could just show that Jesus did not really rise from the dead, because that's the foundation of the faith. So I took my journalism training and legal training and spent 2 years systematically investigating the historical data concerning the resurrection of Jesus, and ultimately became convinced that he did indeed not only claim to be the Son of God, but he backed up that claim by returning from the dead. And so on November the 8th of 1981, that's when I received Jesus as my forgiver and leader, and my life began to radically change in ways I never anticipated.
And since then, you've written a bunch of books. I actually have the DVD here, Case for Christ, Case for Creator, that whole section. And now you have this new book called Case for Heaven. Something prompted you to write this book. Tell us about that.
Yeah, several years ago, I almost died. My wife found me unconscious on the bedroom floor. She called an ambulance. I woke up in the emergency room, and the doctor looked down at me and said, "You're 1 step away from a coma, 2 steps away from dying." And then I went unconscious again. I had an unusual medical condition called hyponatremia, which is an extreme drop in my blood sodium level. And so I lingered on that border between life and death for quite a while until doctors were able to save me. And I found it to be a very clarifying experience, because as a Christian, I believed that if I were to die, I would spend eternity with God. But again, I've got that skeptical bent, and I began to wonder at that moment, is it really true? Does it make sense? Is it consistent with science? Is it consistent with history and philosophy and so forth? And so that was kind of the seed that ultimately resulted in the new book, The Case for Heaven. I spent 2 years, or multiple years actually, investigating and interviewing scholars and experts, neuroscientists, theologians, philosophers, and so forth, on this question of whether or not there is an afterlife.
And I know that it seems that this book came out at a very timely time in our world. I mean, the pandemic, young people who are dying, people that are having to deal with their immortality.
Yeah, that's exactly right. 29% of Americans either know someone who's died of COVID or had a family member die of COVID. I lost my brother to COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. My wife and I were having lunch at a local restaurant, and the waitress was maybe 18 years old, and we started talking to her. She started to cry, and we said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I almost didn't come into work today. We just had a family member die of COVID." And I thought, here's a young woman who probably never thought about death before, but now it's come knocking on her family's door, and now she's concerned. Now she's got anxiety about it. Now she's wondering, is there more to existence than just this life in this world?
Lee, I have less than a minute, but I want to ask, what do you hope to accomplish with this book?
I hope people are encouraged. I hope they walk away with confidence that the biblical teaching about Christianity and the afterlife is true. I look at near-death experiences and show that those are consistent with Christian theology, and that they do demonstrate that our spirit, our soul, does survive our clinical death. And so there's a lot of good evidence. I hope people walk away ever more confident that they can be certain of spending eternity with God.
You have a documentary that's going to be coming out. I love to read, but I love it when it's in video form. Tell us about that in March.
Yeah, the documentary will be in movie theaters for 3 nights in March, and then it'll go to streaming. And it's currently in production out of Phoenix, Arizona. And it's exciting to put it on film because a lot of people, as you say, some people enjoy reading, some people enjoy a more visual experience. And so we're having a great time creating that documentary.
That's awesome. Lee, I so appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. We'd love to have you come visit us in Tulsa. I know you've been here before, but
yes.
It's been too long.
Well, I appreciate that. I'd love to do it again. God bless you and your listeners.
Thank you so much. Want to mention that the books are available at his website, leestrobel.com, and you can also find them at most bookstores.